What makes a soundtrack for a video game? Are they just catchy tunes to listen to while you play? Something to put the player into the correct mood for a certain scene? Or are they deeper than that? If utilized correctly, the music in a video game can be just as impactful as the narrative, characters, or gameplay. With certain usages of techniques like leitmotifs and instrumental symbolism, the soundtrack can evolve and tell a story all on its own just through a musical format. There are many ways this idea can be incorporated into a game, but Tears of the Kingdom takes it to the next level with the Rito's questline of the Wind Temple. If you're a longtime viewer of the channel, you'll know that the Wind Temple has been something I've been wanting to break down since the very moment the game launched. Which was, more than a whole year ago, but hey, we're finally here. And the official soundtrack dropped not that long ago, so let's just say I waited all that time for that. Given the subject of this video, there will be spoilers surrounding the story of the Wind Temple, so if you haven't reached that point in Tears of the Kingdom, I highly recommend playing through it first and coming back to give this a watch. But with that all out of the way, let's take a deep dive into the hurricane of the Stormwind arc. The questline for the Wind Temple begins once you reach Rito Village in the Tabantha region. However, if you played through Breath of the Wild before Tears of the Kingdom, this isn't your first time visiting this place. In the past, this village was full of color and life. The wind would softly come through the lush grass and wooden windmills. The chirping of the children singing along to the village's theme could be heard from a distance as you ascend the cliffside, with the locals sending you a wave and a smile as you pass by. But as you grow closer and closer to Rito Village in Tears of the Kingdom, the cozy and comforting town you once knew is nowhere to be found. Instead, you only find the husk of it, devoured by a raging blizzard and buried under ice and snow. There's no way to access it through the usual bridges, and instead, you have to find an alternative by flying in from higher ground. You glide towards the near monochrome village, where you hear the music slowly fade in. What was once a song full of soul and warmth is now cold and empty. The echoing reverb that is added onto the track gives it an isolating feeling, as if the storm has trapped Rito Village in a barren, icy wasteland with no one to help them. The vibrant instrumentations of clarinet, mandolin, and violin from the original theme have now become muted and corrupted, almost being washed away by the loud whooshing of wind blasting around you. But if we separate the music from the game, we can find that the wind isn't just a sound effect that was added on, but is integrated directly into the track. One of the clever ways both Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom bring the world of Hyrule to life is through its music, and it does this by bringing the surroundings of Link directly to the player. They accomplish this by replicating or symbolizing the sounds of weather through specific instruments or effects. To test this out, close your eyes for a second and try to create an environment in your head that fits the music that you're about to hear. Did you imagine something similar to a desert? Because that's exactly where this song plays. The long, winding notes at the beginning emulates the unbearing rays of sunlight beating down on you. It gets mixed in with the grating sounds of blistering sand sifting across the horizon, and the hollow echoing of each note ending gives a sensation similar to staring off and only seeing blurry heat waves in the distance. Even if you were to listen to this track on the coldest day of the year, you would still be able to feel the heat emanating from it. Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom use this technique of using certain sounds and instruments to recreate an environment in a music format in a number of other situations, but in terms of Rito Village, it uses the violin to replicate breezes of wind. If we were to go back to the original theme of Rito Village, you can hear the soft quivering of violins in the background that sound like wind gently flowing through the grass, and in the section right before that, the violins build momentum like a big gust of air before quickly mellowing as it finally blows out. But if you were to take this idea and compare it to the corrupted version of Rito Village, the violins sound shaky and unstable. The notes shiver, much like the cold and harsh winds that envelop the town. Even if you just listen to the track on your own outside of the game, you can't escape the everlasting blizzard. It brings the struggle of the Rito directly to you, and with how the winds almost overpower the main melody of the song, it shows that they're barely holding on by a thread. If you don't help them out soon, it won't be long before they're buried under snow along with the rest of the village. But it isn't over just yet. Just like how Link brings a ray of light to the village within the dark storm, Tulin also represents that same hope that will save the Rito. The Rito's theme has been morphed into a shell of its former self, but Tulin brightens everything up with how his theme bursts through the ice and wind. It acts as your first sign of warmth within the blizzard, immediately giving you a sense of safety and comfort. While it may seem like all hope is lost, Tulin's theme shows that everything will be okay in the end, so long as you keep your head up high. This carries on into the track Investigation to the Clouds, which plays during the scene where Hearth entrusts the duty of entering the Wind Temple to Tulin. Up until that point, Tulin has been tired of being treated like a child and constantly tries to prove to everyone that he's finally ready to become a Rito warrior. With this opportunity, he gets the chance to do just that, but he also learns the valuable lesson of working together with others instead of rushing ahead on his own. Because of this, Tulin's theme has become more mature compared to when you first hear it. While it's still uplifting and hopeful, it sounds more focused, as if Tulin has finally been able to control his bursting energy and hone it to work alongside others. This idea is further reinforced with the instruments used in the specific track. When listening to other songs related to the Rito, you often hear the accordion. This goes even deeper when you realize that this accordion stems from Rivali, the one who the Ritos shaped themselves after when becoming warriors, and thus becoming the very core of Rito's culture and traditions. But what is unique to the tracks dedicated to Tulin is his wooden flute, which isn't present in any of the other Rito-centric songs. Just like Rivali and his accordion, Tulin has turned into a new beacon of hope for the Rito and is on his way to becoming a one-of-a-kind warrior. So having an instrument solely dedicated to him, as well as the flute and accordion weaving back and forth to play the main melody of the song, shows that progress. This idea will keep evolving throughout the quest, so we'll keep an eye on it as we finally take to the skies and put an end to the blizzard that has been tearing Rito Village apart. When you first enter the Rising Island chain, it doesn't sound very different from the regular theme that plays when you walk around the Hebra Mountains. It's a nice seamless transition between the two tracks, making it so you almost don't notice it until you hear the ambient echoes that's added to the Rising Island chain. While it's a subtle change, it's perfect for setting up the tense atmosphere for the long climb up. And if you take a closer listen to the echoing, you can hear that it's actually quite similar to the same echoing that can be heard in Thunderhead Isles and Dragonhead Island. Considering the setup for the quest behind the Thunderhead Isles, you can argue that this sound effect simply represents the storm that surrounds both it and the island chain. But I'd go a step further to say that it also symbolizes the mystic feeling of merging the past with the present, a thing that can be seen throughout the entirety of Tears of the Kingdom. In both story quests of the Thunderhead and Island Chain, you have to rely on ancient legends passed down through generations, with Thunderhead being the mural of Draco Zoo Lake, and the Island Chain with the Song of the Stormwind Arc. The misty echoing really paints the picture of trying to decipher these old tales and applying them to a modern era, much like feeling your way through the fog. The inclusion of the regular Hira Mountain themes is also a great touch, as it can only be heard in the first area of the Rising Island Chain, the closest you'll ever be to the ground and the familiarity of it. As you climb up higher and higher away from Hyrule's surface, you'll hear it less and less as it gets covered by raging winds that are once again replicated through violins. They're the exact same ones that can be heard in Rito Village, but as you grow closer to the center of the storm, they get louder and more erratic. During all of this, you also get small bits of piano that get sprinkled in every now and then. While they may sound like notes being played at random, they're the beginnings of certain motifs that will unravel as you continue your climb up, the first one being Attack on Ba Meadow. Although Breath of the Wild doesn't have much of a presence in Tears of the Kingdom in terms of its story, it lives on through its music, especially when it comes to the temples that replace the divine beasts as their spiritual predecessors. Attack on Va Meadow fully launches this idea into orbit when its beginning piano loop starts to play as soon as you hit the section with the flying ships. It's much slower compared to the full track in Breath of the Wild, but it's similar to the idea that it's tied to the atmospheric echoing from the beginning of the Rising Island Chain. Just like how the Song of Stormwind Arc is an ancient song whose meaning has faded over time, Attack on Va Meadow has been slowed to show its growing history. It takes a bit to recognize it, but it shows its true identity once the main melody slips in. Note how it starts with the accordion, the flagship instrument of Rivali and the Rito, before getting replaced with a low, more menacing brass instrument. This switch represents two things, the first one being the actual events of Va Meadow's fall in Breath of the Wild. Because the accordion originated from Rivali, the brass instrument that takes over the melody repaints the moment where he was defeated by the Wind Blight. However, now that the accordion has become representative of the Rito as a whole, the same situation can now be applied to them with the blizzard if Link and Tulin fail to resolve it. It's a tense situation, knowing that there's a possibility of history repeating itself. But as you finally reach the top of the climb and break through the clouds of the storm with one last leap, there's a sudden calmness. There are no harsh winds blowing into your ear or foreboding piano notes that threaten you with doubt. There is simply tranquility, as you see the clear skies for the first time since what feels like a century. Like Tulin's theme, a small portion gives you a sense of safety, but this moment also acts as a final warning. With the sight of the dark storm still brewing below you, you know it won't last for long, so will you glide away to the open horizon, or plunge down into the belly of the beast? But even if this one moment presents this choice, you know what you have to do in the end. And so, you take your dive right into the eye of the storm. You only hear this section for a short moment, probably lasting less than a minute, but it is an explosion after the previous calmness. It is a perfect rush of music as you dive down, and even in this tiny section, there's so much to delve into. The first scene is the background loop that sets the base of the song, which sounds like a trickling motion. If you explore the depths before reaching the Rito questline, you may recognize this melody, as it's the same one that plays when you are descending into it. The depths have been completely overrun by Ganondorf's gloom, so having the same melody that plays when you dive shows that you are essentially plunging into a depths in the sky with the Wind Temple and the monster that lays hidden within. But what really takes the main stage is this human choir. Just like how the Rito have the accordion, vocalization is often seen in tracks related to the Zonai, but in this descending section, it sounds reversed and distorted, which is a common sound effect when it comes to Ganondorf and his corruption. Through this, we can see that the Wind Temple has Zonai origins, but has now become a vessel under Ganondorf's control, much like how it was with the Divine Beast and the Blights. We can also hear the fluttering of what sounds like a clarinet getting mixed into this. The clarinet is also a flagship instrument for the Rito, and similar to the erratic shivering of the violins that replicate the sound of wind blasting at you, the clarinet paints the picture of wings flapping. We actually hear this first in Tulin's theme, with the clarinet sounding like a bird coming to a stop to land on a perch. But now, when the same clarinet is put into the middle of the storm, it sounds like it's struggling as it gets drowned by the distorted choir. It can't fly freely like it once did, much like how the Rito are in their current situation. You can only go straight down back onto the ground, where you eventually land into the Wind Temple and hear yet another familiar motif play. This is the exact same jingle that plays when you land normally on the surface map. But it has turned into a lower pitch and ends on a deep, uneasy note. While the original landing motif expressed the expansiveness of Hyrule and the opportunity for adventure, you're in uncharted territory here, one that belongs to the enemy. From this point on, you have to be on your guard. The Wind Temple begins with the same misty reverberation as Thunderhead Isles and the Rising Island chain, illustrating the same idea as them, and even more so now that we are physically in the location foretold in the Song of Stormwind arc. This gets even further built when the actual Song of Stormwind arc begins to play as the main melody of the track. When you first hear it, it is sung to you by the children in Rito Village if you choose to talk to them. It is shown to you in a situation that paints it as nothing more than a children's nursery song, so much so that Tulin initially doesn't believe it and thinks it's foolish to follow. But after seeing the Wind Temple in person, he now accepts it as reality and even uses it to guide his way through the maze. This is shown with how the Song of Stormwind arc is played by his wooden flute. This then gets followed with the Rito accordion. With both instruments getting into the mix, it shows the meshing of the new and old generations, both connecting through their shared history of the Song of Stormwind Arc. This union of the Rito will be what leads them to victory, but with each terminal you unlock, the music only gains more tension and uncertainty. The second phase begins with drums, something you don't typically hear in most Rito songs. The only other song that includes these same drums is an Attack on Valmetto, which is another connection between the two. It creates a warlike atmosphere, preparing you for the battle that's to come. This is strengthened with the distorted sound effects that soon follow, which we have established as Ganondorf's corruption. This symbolizes the enemy beginning to show itself, and that unlocking the terminals will bring you closer to it. The Attack on Valmetto motif begins to creep in as well, being played slowly on the piano as the mystery of the Wind Temple unravels. The Song of Stormwind Arc then gets played a second time, but it doesn't sound as innocent compared to when you first hear it. Just like how Tulin's theme matured over time, so is the Song of Stormwind Arc. It is no longer a song sung by children, but a vision of what's to come in the near future. The tension continues to build up in the third phase, where the drums that were introduced in the second phase become even stronger, heavily pounding like a rapid heartbeat. Playing alongside them are anxiety-inducing violins. These violins play similarly to the ones that replicated the sound of blasting wind, going in and out with trembling notes. While the first phase was eerily calm, representing how you were standing in the eye of the storm is now starting to pick up and become violent. This then gets followed with Tulin's theme, but played with slow, cautious piano notes. Once again, it is played in a lower note to show that he isn't as naive as before. He's being careful with his surroundings, taking the time to think before acting. When the fourth phase starts to kick in, we get to hear a mixture of all sorts of motifs. It begins with a melody that we haven't heard yet, but we'll hear in full length very soon in the future. It's a bit of foreshadowing, and it clues you in even more when you hear the reversed vocals that closely follow it. However, the next section directly contrasts this force of darkness with motifs tied to the Rito and their entire history. This compilation of themes shows that the Rito have faced calamities like this before, and no matter how much they struggle, they will continue to fight until they prevail in the end. This gets elevated in the final phase of the Wind Temple. While this entire last sequence is dedicated to the Rito's legacy and the hardships they have endured, it ends on a somewhat unresolved note. Although the Rito always fight until their last breath, their current battle has yet to be won. And as the following cinematic transitions to the big reveal of the Colgera hiding within the Wind Temple, it's finally time to decide fate. The battle begins with Tulin's wooden flute leading the melody, just like how he's leading the fight itself. The notes that it plays goes up and down, simulating the action of flying up with your glider and diving down to attack the Colgera's weak spots. We then hear a familiar motif get mixed into the background. It isn't the depths version of the diving theme like before, but the normal, uncorrupted version that plays when you're diving on the surface. We are no longer in enemy territory, but on equal grounds, where it's anyone's game now. The music shows a direct clash between the two, as the returning violent winds of the storm and the deep brass notes representing the Colgera try to devour Tulin's wooden flute. But as soon as you land the first hit, the music makes a sudden shift. Mirroring the Colgera's reaction, the instrumentation sounds as if it's recoiling in pain. The key is slightly pitched down, showing the Colgera's growing anger and frustration as it becomes more aggressive in the fight. The diving theme then plays again, but with the addition of the accordion accompanying it. The battle is now beginning to lean towards the favor of the Rito. What once was even ground is now becoming a custom with Rito instruments, showing that they're becoming one with the wind. The fight hasn't been won yet, however, as we start to see another back and forth between Tulin and the Colgera. The Colgera section takes over after the diving theme section, reintroducing the warped vocals that symbolize Ganondorf's corruption and the heavy brass that accompanies it. But Tulin's flute slams right back at it as a counterattack. It pierces through the Colgera section like an arrow, and if you listen closely, you'll hear the Attack on Von Meadow motif looping in the background through violins, as well as a new instrument quietly getting introduced into the Rito's symphony. The tambourine is an instrument that hasn't been heard in Rito tracks until this point, but it plays an extremely important role in the final phase of the fight that we'll see soon enough. This portion leads to another direct clash between Tulin and the Colgera, with Tulin's flute and the Colgera's distorted vocals seesawing with each other like a dance in the sky. It builds up higher and higher, raising the tension until you shatter through another piece of the Colgera's body. The music suddenly bursts with a new energy, a triumphant one. With only one more hit on the Colgera left, victory is almost in sight. The Attack on Von Meadow loop becomes louder, but it sounds upbeat and brave as Tulin's flute once again takes the lead. The tambourine makes its entrance once again, and brings us to everyone's favorite part of the whole entire track. This specific melody has so much history to it. Not only is it representative of Rito Village, but the motif originates from Wind Waker with Dragon Roost Island, where the Rito make their very first appearance in the entire series. This, alongside the tambourine that is a flagship instrument in Wind Waker's soundtrack, brings together the full history of the Rito. This isn't just a battle for the Rito of the Common Era, but for all the Rito who have ever existed. This is further built upon with the undistorted human choir that sings with the motif, as it represents those of the past who have built the village into what it is today. It is an accumulation of Rito's past, and it connects with the present when it's played for a second time, now with Tulin's flute leading the charge. The entirety of Rito's legacy depends on this very moment, and they put their trust into Tulin, a warrior of a new generation, to protect it and guide it towards the future. And, with one final hit, the war is finally won. This journey ends with a final reprise of Tulin's theme as he accepts his role as the Sage of Wind. While this track mostly acts as background music for the cutscene it plays for, it feels like a big sigh of relief. Just like before, it brings a sense of warmth and safety, especially now that the Rito are no longer in any danger. It continues to sound calm and composed to further show Tulin's growth as a warrior. There are violins that once again represent the current of the wind, but under Tulin's newfound powers, they are controlled and gain an even flow of momentum. They charge up, like a bird preparing to take flight as Tulin passes his power to Link. And, once the bird finds its balance in the air, the song ends with a beautiful send-off from the accordion, and the Rito are finally able to fly free, with the clarinet to represent their wings one last time as they soar through the clear sunset sky. Thank you all so much for watching. This video took a lot of work and time to put together, so it would be a great help if you could leave a like. I also have other videos similar to this one on the channel, and have even more planned for the future, so if you enjoyed and want to see more, then please consider subscribing as well. And lastly, I want to give special thanks to the members of the channel. You all are helping my dreams become a reality, and I couldn't be any more grateful. So, thank you all once again, and I'll see you next time.